Hello everyone! In today's video I'm gonna show you how I made my Gaius cosplay from Genshin Impact. As a reference, I used several screenshots from the game itself. Let's begin with the outer top piece. I used deep blue fabrics with a velvety texture and cut out three basic patterns, which are the front piece with the neck flap, the back piece, and this other piece which I stitched to the front as well. I then cut out all the pieces twice and tried them out on my body form. I also stitched in place the rest of the neck piece. And I then cut out all the patterns once again into lining fabrics, except for the flap, which I cut out of the same fabrics. You can also add a layer of padding for extra sturdiness. This is how all the layers will go. You can now sew everything together and turn it around, iron over it, assemble the front and back pieces together, and sew over the laterals. I now copied the overline of the flap so I could make a pattern for my thermoadhesive vinyl. Cut it out and copy it into black vinyl. You can now iron over it and remove the plastic to get perfect no-seam details. Okay, back to work. I also used vinyl for the flap's silver line. And sew in the last neck piece. Finally, I used star clay to make the golden pieces that go on the flap as well. And painted them with golden spray paint. I also made these golden edges with EVA foam and spray paint and glued them in place with contact glue. This is how it's looking like so far. Oh wait, we still have to make the furry neck piece. Simply cut out a rectangle of furry fabrics and sew it, creating a tube. Now turn it around and fill it with the stuffing. And this part is done as well. We are halfway done with the top piece now. I modeled these two little pieces with Blender, 3D printed them and painted with the spray paint. I then drilled a little hole on the back and glued a little chain, which I also glued onto the jacket. And here is the process of both my jackets so far. Did I mention I was making two of these at the same time? Anyways, let's move to the rest of the details. Cut out this shape out of a sky blue fabrics and sew an edge in deep blue. Then use fabric paint to add the last details. And this part is done as well. Finally, the coolest part, let's begin with the cape. I first cut out the shape onto white fabrics, and this other shape for the lower layer. I now use masking tape to cover the parts that have to remain white. And I also use this adhesive plastic thingy to cover some other parts. You can now paint over it with fabric paint. Right here, I had a bit of an epiphany, because when I prepared two layers to sew over the edge and then turn it around, I thought the paint seen with the fabric layer on top looked kinda cool too. So I decided to sew it like this, with the painted face hidden on the inside of the cape. Sew over the edge and turn it around. Iron over it, and your cape is finally finished. I now started with the shoulder armor, cutting out this very basic pattern out of EVA foam and a bunch of triangles which I then glued together to form spikes. I first painted them in silver and later realized it had to be gold, but whatever. I also added some shadings and stuck it in place with a piece of Velcro. And I now move to the top, which I made by cutting out this basic shape first, and disliking it so much I ended up with this after some intense retouching. I now started making the white shirt. First, copy and cut out the patterns, which you can find in the description box, and sew everything together. Finally, add a grey strip around the edges and cut out a short but wide sleeve as well. I decided to make the neck a separate piece, so basically cut out the neck pattern and add this piece, which I made with EVA foam and black fabrics. Next part are the belts. I started with a weird buckle piece, which I made with 5 small pieces of EVA foam shaped like this, and glued all of them together. You can find the pattern in the description box as well. I filled it with a piece of light foam and finally spray painted everything and added a blue crystal, which I didn't record since I made this later on. For the belts, I cut out 2 long stripes of brown leather and 2 more of another fabrics. I sewed them together and turned them over. Finally, I punched some holes onto the thinner belt and added the rest of the details onto the bigger one. The edges made with golden fabrics and 2 golden push pins. Bend the points and secure them with hot glue. And finally, the very last part. For the pants, I started by cutting out the patterns you can find down below. And also draw this shape in elastic darker fabrics. I now cut out the extra fabrics and cut these little slits like this so you can bend the edges and pin them in place. Sew all over the edges and finally add some details with silver vinyl. Now cut out this shape on EVA foam, paint it golden and glue it in place as well. For the button thingies, I also used EVA foam. Glued it on the middle, painted it silver and hand sewn them in place. Yes, sorry, I forgot this little part, so I'll go over it fast. Use golden and black leather to make 2 triangle shapes. Sew them together and add a blue fabric stripe, and this stud I made with EVA foam. Glue everything together and sew them at the bottom of the sleeves. Now, make some gloves by copying the shape of your hand on elastic fabrics. Cut it out and sew along the edges. Open a hole in the middle and the base of your gloves is finished. I sadly didn't have time to finish it, so I left it just like this. Oh, also I added a bunch of studs along the sides of the pants. And your cosplay is now finished.